Guten Tag, everybody. I'm super excited to offer you or show you a highlight of my frozen starter method. I wanted to show you where I stand with my research and why I think this could be a huge game changer for all of you home bakers out there. And it's alive because I'm not there yet to make a full video out of it, but I wanted to show you where I am. And I also wanted to invite you all to provide some feedback and join me a little bit on this research quest and provide some updates for me as well so that I can include them in the video that I'm about to make. So this is going to be the agenda for today. Firstly, I'm going to talk about why this could be a game changer. Then I'll show you exactly my freezing method, my iterations that I have conducted so far. Then we'll talk a bit about the science, why this works. Then a bit about community research, how you can help by testing this method. And then I continue to give you an update on my book, The Sourdough Framework. I have some really cool news to share. And then lastly, we'll end this session by doing a questions and answers. And of course, at any time, I'm observing the chat, so please feel free to ask me questions in the meantime. So I'm really looking forward. Then let's get started. So why I believe this method could be a game changer. First of all, the problem that almost every home baker has is you see pictures on Instagram, on various websites, you see people baking the perfect sourdough bread, and you're like, wow, I really need to try this myself. And then you end up trying this. You're thinking, wow, this looks easy. There's a recipe, make your starter, mix together some flour and water, wait for 8 hours, do 5 stretch and folds. And you try this, and what actually happens is you end up in what I so-call the sourdough trap. The first breads you're making, you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Why is this happening? You're super confused. It's really cumbersome. And some of the key problems I have identified, or some of the key problems you will likely face is, first of all, you will likely not have exactly the same flour as stated in the recipe. So you have a different flour, and that flour behaves different. The properties are different. You have a different temperature. We have viewers here from all around the world, which I find super amazing. Some are in the tropics, some are in the Arctic Circle. The temperature is different, so also the speed at which your dough is ready is different. You might have different water and so on. And then lastly, when making with sourdough, thanks, not here. Thanks for the nice words here in the chat. Thanks for all the hard work. Thanks for all the hard work. Danke für deine Arbeit. You're most welcome, guys. Thank you, everybody who's joining this live stream. Please add your questions or comments. I'm excited to read them. I'm not too good at multitasking, so I'll try my best to first sort of focus on the presentation and then go ahead and chat with you guys a bit more. Very good comment here from Tigger Tales. Don't go chasing that perfect social media sourdough crumb. Exactly. So people chase that perfect bread, which they saw somewhere on social media, and then it's really a frustrating experience. And it's actually good for me because people follow a recipe and then it doesn't work. And that's how they arrive at the bread code, because I explain you guys the why behind each step. So I dive much deeper than the regular recipe. And my strategy, which I think many of you share in this channel, is to understand what exactly is going on. What are you doing at this step? Why is something happening? What are the different parameters? And by understanding what is going on, you can follow recipes out there much easier. The other alternative is that you join a bakery and bake 1,000 or 2,000 loaves almost every week. Then, of course, you also get the hang of it. But we home bakers, which make maybe, I don't know, best case 2 or 3 loaves a week, it's very crucial to understand what's going on. Okay, point 3, the different starter cultures. So you might have different microorganisms in your sourdough starter. Every sourdough is truly unique. Depending on where you are in the world, where your flour is coming from, you have different microorganisms in your sourdough starter, which I find super fascinating because this means that every sourdough starter will provide a different taste to the final bread. You have a different set of microorganisms. Imagine this, like you have some cultures, if a sourdough starter were to represent the USA, you might have some sort of cultures which resemble Los Angeles, some resemble New York, and it's sort of a play together between all these different cultures in your sourdough starter. And every starter is unique and has different properties. Just for this reason alone, you can't follow a recipe because fermentation times, the rate at which your bread dough is ripening, changes from starter to starter. And yes, temperature changes. So let's say it's cold in the morning, but suddenly it gets very warm. This also has an impact on like how fast your dough is done. And all this has to be taken into consideration. And you might also have a different baking setup. Some people have a super fancy Dutch oven to bake the bread, but not everybody has expensive equipment. You might not have a steam injection oven. And yeah, so you have to sort of fiddle your way around all these different parameters. And imagine this could all be a little bit easier. And that's why I'm super interested in this freezing your starter method. We have Canada here joining as well. Hello. Seven, missing your recipes. Thank you so much. And Madison from New York City. Welcome, everybody. And the next problem that happens is, let's say you want to go for vacation. Then you store your starter in the fridge like this. And you want to use your starter from the fridge, but it doesn't work. You can't like directly use it. It might not be in an active state, so you have to feed it a few times. You end up with a little bit of discard. For some people, it even might catch some mold. So you run into the danger of losing your sourdough starter. So it's all a bit, to me, it's still like too complicated. And here, taken from my book, I want to show you a flow chart which sort of shows how you should feed your sourdough starter in order to make sure that you have a good fermentation the moment you make a bread dough. I don't want to go too much into detail, but as you can see already, it looks a bit complicated, doesn't it? And now imagine, please appreciate my emoji design here. Imagine this could all be easier. And so the idea, freeze the starter in the perfect condition. Let's say we are making a starter and we know the starter is in the perfect condition. So first of all, of course, you need to make yourself a starter, but at some point you know, okay, the starter is in a good condition. You have made your first bread dough. So why not take the starter in the perfect condition and then use it to make and then freeze it and then use the frozen starter to make a bread dough. That's sort of the idea I had, which I wanted to explore a little bit further. And I came to this idea after reading so many posts online. Some people were talking about maintenance on our Discord server, and I figured there must be an easier approach because this is the most, whenever I hear people talking about sourdough, they say, I don't do sourdough because it's too complicated. I have to feed my starter and so on and so on. So if we were able to sort of remove this limitation and make it a bit easier, I think this would allow us to bring more people closer to bread making. Some people are drilling on top of my flat. I hope it's not too loud. If it is, please do drop a message in the chat. So that's my idea. Take the starter in the perfect condition and freeze it. And here you can see my starter looking very nice and bubbly. And I took it, froze it, and then on the right-hand side, you can see even more starter, which I didn't place in a small container. And There's going to be an awesome video incoming in just a little bit after talking about my iterations on freezing the stutter. We have one great question which I wanted to ask, which I wanted to put here on the screen from Haka. Thanks so much for your question, Haka. If the stutter is sent from Australia to Britain, will the stutter grow into a different stutter? Nope, it will not. More about that in a little bit, but the cultures you have initially grown, they will take over your stutter. And the moment you introduce new cultures, the initial cultures are there and they will eliminate new cultures going in there. So it's almost impossible to change a starter culture once you have it established. Not here, managing decent breads, thanks to your tips. Thank you so much. Then we have Michael from Texas. Hi, Michael. Nice to have you on the live stream here. Frick Jonathan, hello. Tamar AW, thoughts on honey added to a starter? I've seen this come up a lot lately in forums. I am a beekeeper, and I do this just because I want to cultivate new different bacterial and yeast strains from which I can make a starter. If you have an existing starter and add the honey to it, it's not going to make a difference. However, you could grow a sourdough starter culture from honey, and it would surely provide you with many, many interesting microorganisms, because the bees are actually flying to all these plants, and they have all these spores on their body, and all these spores will also then go into the honey. And some of these spores can ferment flour. And by just I would start by making a water honey mixture, get this into a stage where it ferments, and then at some point change it to a flour-based culture. So these cultures from the honey, from the bees, from all the plants, they will survive, and you'll have a honey-based starter. And then at some point you can switch to flour. Then we have Robin here from LA. So excited because I don't make that much bread, but I want sourdough. I feel like I make more things with the discard. Okay. Frick has a great question. I'm making gluten-free starter from my aunt. Is the procedure similar? Yes, it is. It's exactly the same procedure. You can make a starter out of pretty much any flour, any plant. It's very easy. I, in fact, once made a starter out of water, which I collected next to a reef somewhere in the ocean. And there's yeasts and bacteria living in the ocean. They have been living there way before they arrived on land. What I did is I took the ocean water, I mixed it with pasteurized coconut sugar to make sure I didn't have too much contamination with other spores. And then I got a brew going, and I kept feeding it a little bit. And then my brew was ready. It was very much able to handle pasteurized coconut sugar. And then I switched to flour feedings, and these microorganisms then start to ferment the flour. So I find this super, super, super fascinating. And there's so much that we have not discovered about bread making. It feels like we're just getting started here. Hi, Key, and hi, Miranda from UK. So awesome video incoming. And just a bit before I talk about after I talk about my iterations. So my first iteration was the following. I took a large quantity of starter, which I had just shown you before, when it's ripe, so in the perfect stage. And then I thawed it. I froze it, and then I thawed it for around 3 to 4 hours. And I used that starter to make a bread dough. And this was the bread I made on my first iteration with this method. And I was like, bingo, this could be huge. And then my second iteration was then, okay, now I froze too much starter. Why not just use exactly the same? Why not freeze the amount of starter exactly that I need, which is typically around 50 grams for 500 grams of flour. So I just froze exactly 50 grams in the same box, and then I placed it in a water bath around 50 degrees Celsius, and then I used the starter after 30 minutes. So rather than waiting for it to thaw, put it into a water bath and then use it after 30 minutes. So that was my second iteration, and that also nicely worked. And then my third iteration, which I want to show you now some pictures that I took. Again, I take the starter in its perfect stage. I use just as much starter as I need. So in this case, I used 50 grams of starter. And then I put it onto parchment paper because parchment paper typically has some sort of wax on top of it, so it doesn't stick. And then I just spread it out very, very thinly with a spatula. Wrapped it like this. Reminds me a little bit of some nice, delicious pastry dough. And then I place it like this in my freezer. I'm sorry that my freezer looks like such a mess. And then a few days later, my starter was completely frozen. And I could use it like this directly. So because it's also so thin, it of course warms up way faster. And the only thing I did is I took the starter like this, put it into my hands. I was able to rub it in my hands, and then it had the right temperature, and I could use it to make a dough directly. And now I promised you that there would be an awesome video incoming, and let's put this video on the screen here. Yep. So this is a time-lapse video that I took. And oh, can I pause this here for a second? Oops, nope. Okay, I'm gonna play it a bit more, but I'll also talk about this real quick. So on the left-hand side, you can see a starter, which has been just kept at room temperature. In the middle, you can see a starter which I kept in the fridge and then used it to inoculate another starter. And on the right-hand side, I'm just putting the video on here again. And on the right-hand side, you can see the starter that I froze. So I used exactly the same quantities of starter. So exactly the same flour, just that the starters were coming from different sources originally. So again, left-hand side room temperature, middle fridge, and right frozen. Then I put these rubber gloves on top because I wanted to measure how much CO2 are these starters producing. CO2 being an indicator of how active is this starter. Of course, that's not the only thing you should consider, but if you have a starter that produces a lot of CO2, that means that you will have a nicely leavened bread because it increases a bit more in size. And I'm saying I'm not there yet to make a full video out of this, but I wanted to show you. I feel if you just look at the starters now, and you can see that in the jar, they're all increasing in size, and the gloves are lifted, but they're not being lifted so much in the middle. And I feel that's just because there might be a small hole in the glove or so. So I definitely need to repeat this experiment one more time. But what you can see is that I expected the frozen starter to perform way less than the others. But if you just look at the jar on the right-hand side, you can see like how it starts to bubble up, and it even starts to inflate the whole glove. So this is an indication that it seems that the frozen starter produces a lot of CO2 as well. I'm getting some comments from Hacker. So I got a lot of hate on one of my other videos because I was not using these gloves, but I was using some adult balloons. And this also caused some issues with the YouTube algorithm. So I repeated this experiment again, this time with these gloves, because they also work very nicely. But yeah, I run into the issue in the middle that it seemed that they were leaky somewhere. So that's the reason why I think the fridge one didn't increase that much in size. But just looking at the jars, I would say that they all perform equally well. Side note, the one I used from the fridge has only been in the fridge for a couple of days. So it hasn't been there for a month. It might just have been, I think, 3 days or something. So it was still relatively fresh in the fridge. Before talking about the science, why this works, let me check all the questions that you wrote in the chat, and I really appreciate you asking a lot of questions. This makes this so much more interesting. So we have Jeff placing some starter in the fridge, in the freezer last week. That's pretty cool. Steven also has frozen a starter. Impressive. Nice. Frick. Can you freeze the dough? Yes, I have in fact tried to freeze the dough before, and it also worked. So I froze it after the bulk fermentation, after the main fermentation was completed. I froze it directly in the Banneton, but it's a bit tricky because then it thaws. The outer parts of the dough start to ferment faster than the inner parts, because on the outside it's of course a bit warmer than on the inside. And yeah, while it works, I have not made that good of an experience with freezing a complete sourdough bread, but please experiment a bit more. Yes. So, okay, before talking about this comment, let's maybe talk a bit more about the science, why this works. So one of the things you need to understand as a baker about why sourdough works is the following. I talked about spores before. There are spores everywhere in the world. In fact, while I'm breathing into my microphone, I'm probably breathing out around 20 spores or maybe even more with every breath that I'm taking. And these spores are also on the surface of plants. So you have a leaf from a plant, then you have this layer of different yeast organisms living there, bacterial organisms, and they're living there in harmony, and they are actively helping the plant to defend itself against other predators, other deadly microorganisms, for instance. And these microorganisms live in a symbiosis with the plant, and they receive sugars from the photosynthesis from the plants as a thank you to protect the plant. And that is the same thing with wheat, with rye. Everywhere on the plant, you have these microorganisms living. Now, what happens is the moment you chop off the plant or you harvest the grains, these microorganisms have an issue because there is no more food. So, what do these microorganisms do? They start to build spores and go into a hibernation stage. And this is taken from my book, The Sourdough Framework, where you can read about this. It goes a lot more into detail, but I think it's important to understand because this is also the basis for the freezing method. So, so the moment you sort of dry everything out, they produce spores. And the same thing happens when, I think, I still have to research a bit more, when you freeze the dough. So when you freeze the starter, they also produce these kind of spores and go into a hibernation stage. Or maybe they don't even freeze the store, but they just are able to handle being frozen and come alive right away. And that's the reason why I also can dry my starter. On the right-hand side, you can see my dried starter, which I'm also using as a backup store for myself. So when you put your sourdough into extreme conditions, it will start to produce spores. At the moment you add water again and new food, these spores will come alive again and your starter will become alive again and you can start making bread. And by setting up a sourdough starter from all these dangerous or from all these microbes you have, by feeding with flour and water, you are selecting these microbes which are able to ferment the dough. And these microbes will ultimately take over your flour water mixture and exterminate new microorganisms coming inside. That's why also a regular starter normally doesn't catch any mold in the fridge, but it can do if you place in the fridge and it dries out at the top, for instance. It's sort of like pickled food. Medicine asks a question. Placing it on the flat parchment paper is best, so no jar or container. You show that first. Yes, so medicine, that was my first approach. I placed it into a container, but then I had the problem that I had to thaw the starter first. So then I just used a very, very flat surface on which I put the ready starter, the parchment paper. And this way, thawing would be way faster. So by sort of reducing it in size from this to sort of this, I'm able to thaw it way faster. That was my hypothesis. That's why I tried it like this. And that method, I think, is the best one for my 3 iterations so far. So while talking about the science here, of course, I still need to do a lot more research. So I'm still at the start. Now, I would like to ask all of you for your help, because I'm just getting started, and of course, I can't bake so many breads. And since we are all the bread code community, everybody here makes bread. I kindly ask you, please test this method yourself. And I would super appreciate if you could do that. Take some of your starter while it's ripe, freeze it, try to make a bread dough out of it, and then please, you can join our Discord server, or you can also share your comments, of course, below this stream as a comment. breadco.de/discord, and I made an extra channel which is called Freezing Starter Research. And please share your findings and updates, and maybe also some pictures of some of the breads, because so far I've only tested around 5 bakes with this method. And this is, of course, not statistically relevant. We need way more people trying this. So yes, if you're interested in helping, sharing your results, I would highly, highly appreciate that. And maybe we can come up with an even better method than my parchment paper. Maybe I'm missing something. We as a community, I'm sure we can find the best method together. And now let's talk real quick about some of the limitations. What about flavor? I think this is a really good this is a limitation that I still need to dive deeper into a little bit, because while I didn't notice that big of a difference in flavor, do actually all the microorganisms survive this freezing method? What happens? Would the bread taste different? So I think this is something that still has to be observed a little bit. And also, do you diminish some of the microorganisms? Is it like this, that some of the microorganisms just don't survive this whole process? What about larger quantities for bakeries? One of the reasons why making sourdough bread is so hard for larger bakeries is that, you need to change the process. The conditions change. And so you always need to have an expert there observing the batch of dough fermenting. It's not very easy to make sourdough in machines because you sort of need to understand the dough, read the dough. So I think for a bakery that produces a lot of bread, it's probably impossible to freeze the starter in the exact condition. You would need to freeze a lot of starter. But maybe if this method could work, and there would be a method to freeze it for larger bakeries, they would always end up being able to bake with the same starter, which would make the whole process probably a bit easier. But number 4, I think the biggest disadvantage of this method is that you, of course, need a freezer. And not everybody has a freezer. So this only works if you have a freezer. I'm just checking the questions here real quick. So Stephen Kelly. So why would freezing keep the spores dormant? However, leaving the non-fat starter on the counter would kill it. So I'm not 100% sure yet what exactly happens on a science level when you freeze the starter. I'm wondering if it produces spores or if the microorganisms just freeze and don't even manage to create spores. I still need to do a bit more research on what exactly happens at this. But what I can for sure say is that if you leave your starter for too long on the kitchen counter, you get these spores. So an unfed starter at some point will produce these spores, and then it takes a while to get the starter back into an active stage. But more research has to be done. If you know a source or if you have something that could help this discussion, kindly post this here as a comment on the YouTube video, or you could even, if you're a tech-savvy person, go to my book and open up an issue for the book, and we can discuss it there and make sure to add this knowledge so that everybody can read it. I'm going to be researching a bit more, and then when I release the new video, which contains everything, I'll talk a bit more about this. But I still have to figure it out more in detail on how it works. Yes, Key Brown. This live stream is going to stay on the channel, and you can watch it at a later time too. Madison, thank you so much for tuning in. See you soon. Charles, I have a starter. Bob, by the way, it's very important that you always name your starter, else it's bad luck. So please make sure to give your starter a name. In the deep freeze for 11 months. I wonder if he has survived. Well, Charles, there's only one way to find out, right? Please find it out and test it. And let us know. Please share a picture on our Discord or a comment here on the stream once you've done it, and let us know whether it worked. I'm sure that it would work. So there are some limitations and we need to do a bit more testing, but I think if we were to find a really good method, it could simplify the whole process for a lot of people. And maybe even it could be possible to build a pre-mixed flour starter frozen mixture that stores could sell. So right now, if you buy a starter culture from most supermarkets, at least in Germany, it's not a pure starter culture, but there's always commercial yeast mixed inside. So I think let's figure this out a bit more, and I'm very curious to see where it's going. I think this really could be a game changer for a lot of home bakers. Great question from Michael Gomez. So when the starter was thawed, did you still have to feed it before adding it to the mix? Nope. And that's the difference. So you freeze it in the perfect condition, you thaw it, and then you can directly use it to make a bread dough. So no feeding in between necessary, and this greatly simplifies the whole process. Okay, so then back to the agenda. I wanted to provide all of you with a short update on my book, The Sourdough Framework, where we are, what's the current stage, and let's have a look. So first of all, the feedback on the book has been really, really, really amazing. I'm going to show all of you a real clip here. Yep. Follow all the other bread baking books out there. Again, it's free. You don't have to buy my book. You can read the whole content for free on thissourdoughframework.com. But some people have asked me, hey, please, it would be awesome to have this as a book that you can gift to a friend or just read in case you don't want to be in front of the screen. And so where are we? The feedback on the final product has been truly amazing. Everybody has been saying, I love this book. And I made sure that we also choose just the best quality. So I really wanted to make sure that all the papers and everything is something that you're proud of when you put this into your bookshelf or somewhere else. And we did a Kickstarter campaign initially to crowdfund this, and then some people could also pre-order this. And the Kickstarter campaign was a huge success. Many people bought the book, but there have been some issues which I want to talk about real quick, which is the shipping has been way more expensive than I expected. Shipping in Germany, of course, was no problem because we were in Germany, but the international shipping has been 45 euros instead of 15 euros as planned, or I think I planned a bit more, but way, way more expensive. And I, of course, covered like all the costs for this. And then on Kickstarter, people can still change their address even throughout the delivery process. This was also a little bit of a pain. I had some issues with international customs. So a lot of books returned to my address and I had to pay again for shipping. Yep, overall, this has been a nightmare in terms of shipping, but the overall product, I think, is amazing, and it was totally worth all the efforts and extra hassle. And I'm asking myself always, why should I focus my efforts on the hardcover version if everybody can just read it for free online? So I would be curious to read your comments on what you think I should do. Should I sort of print another batch? or whether I should focus all my efforts on the free online version. If I were to print another batch, I would definitely sort of need to do another Kickstarter campaign. But I'm kind of checking right now how big the interest is, if I should go through the whole process one more time. But yeah, please let me know if you would be interested in sort of supporting this book project. Just drop a comment here so that I can see, okay, there might be a bit of interest or not. And also, if you want, you can go to my shop and there's a newsletter box at the bottom, and you can just put in your email there, and then you would be notified about updates on the book project. It's been a hell of a ride. This project was a dream come true. It was 2 years of my time focusing on this project, and it's great to see that it turned into this. Yeah, please let me know what you think. Your thoughts. Yes, I already said that. And now let's continue with the Q&A session. I'm going back to the live stream here to see all of your chat messages. Grace, how do we get a copy of your book? So right now, there's no way. All the books have been sold out. I'm out of stock, but that's why I'm asking for your thoughts. If there was enough demand, I could print another batch, but I would sort of need to cover the costs to print the initial batch. And that's why my idea was to eventually do another Kickstarter campaign to pre-finance printing everything. And that's because I expected the last campaign to sort of at least be break even. But with all the shipping and so on, it has been more of a loss than a profitable project. But if people from the community say, hey, we want to get another book, we want to support you, Hendrik, then I could think about doing another Kickstarter campaign, or just focusing on the free version, which is accessible to everybody. Thank you, guys. Miranda, please print another batch. I'd like 2 or 3 copies. Thanks, Grace. And then Gert, I love the book. Please also create a hardcover for the recipe book. Oh, yes. Actually, thank you so much, Gert, for mentioning this. There is also another book out there, which is called the Sourdough Framework Recipes. I need to take a mental note to also add this to the description box. So that's just my favorite recipes in a single small book. Since the Sourdough Framework, the book itself, it only contains 1 recipe on how to make delicious flatbread. I wanted it to be the source of knowledge, the basis to teach everybody how to make bread, but I didn't want it to be cluttered with different recipes. It's just the ultimate source of knowledge you need to follow other recipes, and that's why the Sourdough Framework only contains 1 basic recipe to make flatbread, which you can make everywhere. All you need to make flatbread is a pan, pretty much. But yep, then since people have been asking me a lot about also different recipes, I also created another book, which is called the Sourdough Framework Recipes, and that's of course also free to read. It's completely free. It only contains a couple of basic recipes to make rye bread, naan bread, and I don't recall the other recipes. And some people from the community even submitted some recipes which are inside. They have been peer reviewed, of course. I'll share a link to the description, but if you just Google for the Sourdough Framework Recipes, I'm sure you will find it. Stephen Kelly, have you looked into printing on demand with Amazon? That would solve the international shipping issues. Not sure if that's feasible. Actually, yes, I have done this, but the quality that I'm looking for in terms of the design, how the pages look and everything, I just don't get this quality from Amazon printing on demand. And that's why that is not an issue. To solve the shipping issues, I managed to find an option which is called international book delivery by my shipping provider. And this greatly reduces the shipping costs overall. Before, they were sent as a parcel, but now they are sent in a letterbox, and that really reduces the shipping. Unfortunately, I realized this option was available way too late. I thought about it initially, but then it was sort of deprecated from the website. But after talking to the sales support, I received this method again. So that was a huge bummer. But yeah, printing on demand, I considered it, but based on the quality that I want the book to have, it wouldn't work. Another option I considered was, of course, to also ship something to maybe Amazon in the US into their warehouse. That could be a good option to reduce the shipping costs a bit further. Key Brown, where can we get the recipe book? I didn't know you had one. Okay, I want to lower expectations a bit for the recipe book because it's not the final book yet. It contains some basic recipes, but it's not fully featured complete yet. I'm gonna be sharing the link here. I think I can create a banner, sort of. Oh wait, maybe I can even highlight my own comment. Let's see if that works. Yes. So that's github.com/Hendricious, which is still my gamer name from when I was 12 years old. And then the Sourdough Framework recipes, or just Google for this Sourdough Framework recipes and you will find it. And there's a direct link to download the PDF. Yeah, so if you have some more questions, please bring all of your questions. I would be super curious. Every bread-related question, whatever you would like to know, I'm interested in reading it. And maybe because I've been talking so much about the book, just real quick. There I am. Wow, I'm huge now. Brave tab. So just that you've seen it, that's the website of thissourdoughframework.com. And here at the bottom, what you can do is you can download the book as a PDF or as an EPUB so that you can read it on your ebook reader. But you can also read everything online here. So the full content of the book is here for you online to read. So there's absolutely no reason to pay for anything. The hardcover copy I mentioned before is only a way either to support me or to gift something to a friend, but all my knowledge continues to be open source and free because I want all of you to be able to bake amazing bread out there regardless of budget. It should not be required to buy expensive tools or expensive courses to make amazing bread. The goal of my life is, at the end, I want to look back and I want to have enabled many, 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 many people to make something so basic as bread. Mastering bread, I think, is one of the best skills or one of the best decisions I took in my life because there's nothing better than a fresh homemade bread. And after you get the hang of it, you will be able to make much, much, much healthier bread compared to most store-bought, commercially made bread. Of course, there are exceptions, but the basic bread you get in the supermarket, it's broken. It's nowhere similar to the bread that we used to make many, many years ago. We always made bread with sourdough, and sourdough changes sort of the structure of the bread, and the final bread becomes tastier and it also becomes a little bit healthier, although I don't want to go too much into details about health. That's always a highly debated topic, but yeah, you will make amazing bread. And seriously, the only thing you need is a pan pretty much to make bread. And just to go through this a little bit, this book, of course, or the book contains a lot of awesome flow charts, which make it very easy for you to follow and understand exactly what is going on here. And what we did is pretty much for the Kickstarter campaign, we took all this content and just made it a bit more beautiful. So yeah, that looks even nicer. But I invite you to check out the website, read all the content, share it with your friends, and enable as many people around you to make bread at home. It's really not that hard, and this is sort of a great basis to really understand what's going on, how to make great bread. Okay, well, that was a long monologue. I'm sorry for that. Diane Roberts, I'm a neophyte. Can somebody in chat please explain to me what a neophyte is? I have no idea what that is. My refrigerator starter has been untouched for several months and has a thin black layer on top. Can it be dangerous to pull out and try to bring it back to life? I'm glad that you asked this question because I showed a picture in my presentation, which let me see if I can pull it back here on the screen. Video, build. Just 1 second. It's uploading. Does it look similar to this, Diane? So here in the back, you can see my starter in the fridge, and it has this kind of layer on top. Does it look like this? And Michael and Talking Mind, great questions coming up here. I will be answering them in a second. Nice. So this is how Diane Roberts' starter looks like. And check this out. My starter looks exactly the same, and that's called hooch. What happens after some time is that the flour and water separate. So the water gets out of this mixture and just stays on top and creates a layer. And that's called hooch. It's actually a good thing that you have this hooch, because if you didn't, your starter would dry out at the top and you might get mold into your starter. So this is not bad at all. If you have mold on your starter, that's a different topic. You can also go to my troubleshooting section in the book and read about it, but this is totally normal. Just take a bit of the starter and use it to, you have to refresh it, the starter, because it's very old. It's not that active yet. And so maybe the next time, once your starter is active, try the freezing method that we discussed in this video. If you guys are just joining late, we discussed the whole freezing method of the starter and its potential at the start of the video. The stream will be live on the channel, and feel free to watch it again one more time. Then a question from Michael Gomez. How do you know when to freeze the starter? How do you know when it's at its peak? Thanks. Michael, thank you so much for this amazing question. One thing you should learn when you make your own starter, you should be able to determine when it's ready to be used. That's one thing you need to know. And for this, please allow me to put one slide back on here. I'm just trying to find the right slide. Yes. Oops. And I also need to remove the other image. I'm sorry. First of all, you need to create your starter. And then, to me, the most important indicators whether the starter is ready to be used or not is I go by the smell of it. So I like to smell the starter. It should have a vinegary or yogurty smell. That's a good indicator, but it shouldn't sort of punch you in the face. And at the same time, you also want to check that it's bubbly, that it has increased a little bit in size. And then it's a good indicator that your starter is ready to be used. Consider it should increase a little bit in size. It should smell a bit vinegary or yogurty, and then you are ready to use the starter. It's always better to use the starter a little bit earlier rather than too late. If you were to use the starter a little bit later, chances are the fermentation in your bread dough might not be on point. You always have to find the perfect balance between everything. But if you were to use the starter a little bit late, you could do that. But then you would need to lower the amount of starter that you need. Let's say my starter is sort of active. For 500 grams of flour, I might end up using 50 grams of starter. That's, in baker's math, around 10%. Now, if my starter is sort of a bit older, I might lower this to just 5%. So that would be 25 grams, if my math is correct. Because the starter will regrow inside of the main dough. And it's gonna achieve a balance again in the dough. So if the starter is very fresh, I can use a bit more. If it's very old, I can use a bit less. And I mostly go by bubbly, size increase, and the smell of the starter. I hope that answered your question, Michael. What do I need to get enough oven spring when I open bake with cold oven? Is it possible? Yes, I still need to do more research too on this topic though, but I have baked amazing sandwich bread by placing my bread directly in a cold oven and then heating up the oven. When making freestanding sourdough bread though, so no container, I've not been so successful with baking in a cold oven. If you have some thoughts on this, please share them in the comments of the YouTube videos. This might be helpful to other bakers as well. Diane Roberts, you are most welcome. Tamar, I love your generosity. You are a wonderful person. Oh, thank you so much, Tamar. I highly appreciate your kind words. This whole channel is just my hobby. As you might know, well, I'm called the Bread Code because I'm a software engineer and I'm working 3 days per week as a software engineer. That's where I'm earning my money. And my 2 bread baking days, which are typically Thursdays or Fridays, are just for fun. And I don't want to turn this into a business because I just do it because I want to enable as many people around the world to make great bread at home. And I've never wanted to turn this into a commercial thing where I sell you guys random stuff that you don't need. I earn my money with my main job, and this bread baking is just a hobby. And of course, if sort of at some point I would be break even with everything, that would be great. But I love bread too much that I want to turn it into a commercial thing. I'm kind of scared that I would lose my enthusiasm if I were to turn this into my job. So just a bit explanation why I'm doing this not commercial. My main job pays for the bills, and the 2 bread baking days are just for fun. And some of these days I don't bake bread. I go to my bees, do some crazy stuff with my bees. I have these 2 days per week where I'm thankful that I can do whatever I want. Key Brown, I have a silly question. So Key, first of all, there are no silly questions. You can ask every question you like. And I also encourage everybody who has more questions, who's not here in the live stream yet, but sees this at a later stage, please join our Discord, breadco.de/Discord. You can ask all your questions, and our community is really nice. And there are so many skilled people in there, more skilled than me probably, and they will always be happy to answer your questions. Okay, now let me read your question real quick and take a sip of water. Mm-hmm. So interesting. There is organic all-purpose flour, 11.4% protein, and another flour, Azure Standard Unifying 100% whole red wheat bread flour. The question is, would my sourdough bread be considered whole wheat then? That's a good question. I would consider it whole wheat if you just use 100% whole wheat flour. So none of the all-purpose flour, just full whole wheat flour. I'm still also myself researching on how to make the perfect whole wheat bread. I've tried to mill my own whole grains. One viewer sent me some of his flour, but I'm nowhere as successful compared to when I buy a perfect whole wheat flour that I know. There's just one vendor that I know in Europe that sells this flour. Then I make amazing bread, but home milling my own flour has always been a problem. So I'm sorry, Key Brown, I can't provide you a proper answer to this question. I just want to highlight this one more time because I think there is an interesting point in here, which is red hard wheat with malted barley. So when you add malt to your dough, what happens is you have a lot more enzymatic activity. So by just adding a little bit of this malted flour or just also a little bit of whole wheat flour to your dough, the fermentation of your dough is going to be faster because these enzymes are on the hull of the grain and they come into contact with water first. So that's why you have more enzymes. And these enzymes will trigger the conversion, which converts the white powder, the starch, into sugars, which can then be eaten by the microorganisms. Can you send invite to Discord? Yes, of course. I'm just gonna put the link here too in the screen. Put it here. So That's breadco.de/discord. I love these kind of domain hacks. Feel free to join, everybody. Bring your questions. I'm also around, and I also kindly invite all of you to share the results of the freezing method in our specifically created Discord channel, which you can see right here. Okay, sweet. Now there's another question from Jack McGee. I've been trying to make a starter for a couple of weeks, but it simply didn't work for some reason. Should I try a new batch? What could be the problem? I'm not sure where you're based, Jack, but one of the issues I frequently see is that people use chlorinated water to make a starter. I'm not sure if you're doing that, but don't use chlorinated water because its purpose is to eliminate the microorganisms. So you don't want to use that kind of water to make a starter. You always want to use bottled water. And try to use a whole wheat flour to make the starter initially. I think you already said that you were using whole wheat flour. It could be that maybe there's some contamination in the flour. So I would surely recommend that you also try a different whole wheat flour, ideally from a different company. It doesn't have to be whole wheat. It could also be whole rye. Interestingly, it seems that whole rye flour, has the highest contamination with microorganisms, which is what we want. We want the starter to grow. So it could be a good strategy to try to get whole rye flour, because based on experience, it will be way faster to make a starter with whole rye flour. I hope this answered your question, Jack. Talking mind. Thank you for bringing this up. This is one of my favorite topics. And veteran viewers of my channel will now smile because I love fruit flies. And you might be thinking, why fruit flies? Why is he so obsessed with fruit flies? But fruit flies are incredible for our sourdough cultures. They are incredibly important for our ecosystems, the fruit flies. And let me explain. I made a starter out with the help of fruit flies once. And so why do fruit flies come to your sourdough starter? And that's super, super interesting and fascinating. They come to your starter because, let's say you have a fruit. The whole surface of the fruit, an apple or a pineapple, is covered with these microorganisms. And sometimes they even live inside of the fruit. Now, I said these microorganisms are symbiotic with the plants, but that's actually not so true. They are really opportunistic. And once they realize the ship is going down, the apple has fallen from the tree, they think about, okay, we need to reproduce and we need to attack our host. So that's what they're doing. They are starting to ferment the apple, pretty much. They're starting to consume it. And then what they're doing is they're producing these compounds, aroma compounds, and they are attracting fruit flies. So it's actually not the fruit attracting the fruit flies, but it's these yeasts fermenting these fruits that attract the fruit flies, and that's why the fruit flies come there. And the yeasts are doing this because the moment these fruit flies are sort of crawling all over the fruits, all over your dough, the yeasts are able to attach themselves or some spores on the fruit flies, and then the fruit fly goes away, flies to another sort of fruit, and lands on this fruit. And this way, the yeast is able to reproduce. It's able to spread itself throughout your city, the country, and the whole world. So these fruit flies are the bees for wild yeasts. Kind of fascinating, right? And I made one video which many people were like, oh, I would not dare to eat this bread. But I was trying to isolate these yeast spores from the fruit flies and make a sourdough starter out of it. And I still have it actually frozen. Nobody in my family dared to eat this bread, but I gotta say, it really tastes a lot more, it tastes a lot different compared to any other sourdough bread I've ever eaten. I would say it has really more of a fruity note to it. And yeah, I made a sourdough starter with the help of these tiny fruit flies. Yeah. Okay, that was a monologue about fruit flies. I hope you guys found it interesting. Robin, how long can the starter live in the refrigerator? Robin, that's a great question. So in theory, it can live there for years, but one of the things that frequently happens is it dries out on the surface, and then you have a problem. So my recommendation is based on this video. I still need to do more research. Either freeze the starter, or what I frequently do is I add a layer of water on top of my starter, like 2-3 centimeters. I don't know how much that is in inches. And what happens is you end up having sort of pickled flour and water. And the starter will produce spores inside, and it will stay alive. And this layer of water will protect the starter from mold. So for long-term storage, even at room temperature, you could store it at room temperature, just add a big layer of water on top and you're safe. And then a couple of feedings after taking it out from the fridge, or while it's at room temperature. I had some starters sitting at room temperature for 6 months using this method. It's gonna become alive again after a couple of feedings. And I'm curious how it behaves different to freezing. What's happening there on a microscopic level, but I still need to find out and research a bit more. Jack McGee says he had a question on his starter that's not going. Jack, I kindly also invite you to share some of your details on our Discord, which I shared here before, to the experts, and we will get your starter going. Don't worry about it. We'll fix your starter issue. I would recommend, in your case, please try a different flour just to start with. And maybe even try a local Dominican Republic flour, whatever you can find. I'm not sure what you guys grow. I guess maybe also some rice, or is it too hot? I'm not so sure, but you could even use a local product or maybe a local fruit that you have to get your starter going. I think that would be amazing and really give your flour this unique Dominican Republic touch. Key Brown, thank you so much for answering all the questions. You're most welcome. I have another question. Is whole red wheat flour the same as whole wheat flour? My flour is brown in color versus typical white flour. I would say yes. That's probably just a different variety of wheat, and that's why it's whole red wheat. There are different wheat varieties, and maybe in your case, that's just one particular wheat variety. Asher, thank you for all your knowledge, Hendrik. Your videos are fun, informative, and have helped me along my bread journey. Asher, you are most welcome. I'm super glad that I had this impact on your life. This is really the reason why I'm doing this channel. Seriously, reading comments like this, enabling people to make bread, nothing could make me happier. I'm turning this world into a breadier place. So thanks for the nice words. Michael Gomez. Wow, that's very similar how I make tepache, a pineapple beverage that is naturally fermented with the pineapple skins. Yes, you're also selecting these microorganisms. So I'm sure you could use that to make a starter, because the same thing happens when you mix flour and water. The water activates these enzymes, and then starch is converted into other sugars. And this is where the microorganisms hook in. This is what the microorganisms are sort of eating. So I'm sure that could work in a similar way. Fruit flies are the bees of yeast. Awesome observation. Yes, thanks, Grace. I agree. I sort of also love this comparison. I think more people should know about this. So please, when you have people talking about fruit flies and you watch this live stream or this video, please share them the positive news about fruit flies. I think they're really awesome. Alrighty, so I see no more questions for now. We are already at an hour. And one more time to end this live stream, please. Your help is needed on the freezing starter method. Please share what you found, what you discovered with me in the freezing starter research channel. Link here to the Discord is on the right, and then I can take all your findings and convert this into a video, and then also update my book with whatever I find on the freezing method. And lastly, let me know, please, what you think about the Sourdough Framework book, hardcover book, if I should focus on a second edition, if you would be interested. If you want, I'll put the link here as well, so you can go to my shop website, where I just sell a bit of solder and some infographics, which I've left from the first batch here, and put your name into the newsletter. And if I decide to print another batch, I will notify you. I'm curious to read your thoughts on this topic. The other option would be that I sort of just stop this project and focus more on the free version that's out there. And Dora, thank you so much for the nice words. I appreciate it. Thanks, Key. You're most welcome. I hope all of you had a nice time. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best with baking. I'm going to be going to my garden now, because apparently a neighbor reported there's a bee swarm from another neighbor. So I'm going to try to collect that bee swarm now. But before doing that, I'll eat this nice Portuguese pastel de nata. It could be a bit more brown, I guess. But seriously, if you are ever in Europe, in Portugal, you need to eat these. This is sort of like croissant dough, and then with a custard cream inside. They are really, really, really good. Double check from the bottom that they have a nice spiral pattern here. They could be a bit more charred, but I'm just in Hamburg, Germany, so we are not in Portugal. We do have a big Portuguese community here. Seriously, these are my favorite treats. Anyways, thank you so much. See you all soon. Bye-bye. Oh, I'm still here, but now I'm gone.